Today we put together this epic pendant from Final Fantasy XIV. Stay tuned. Alright, so every Friday my team and I get together and we look up like different ideas for the show, fun stuff we want to make. And to be honest, we mostly just kind of screw around and watch cool videos. But upon watching the trailer for the Final Fantasy XIV Endwalker, we all saw this pendant that Y'shtola is wearing, and immediately, unanimously said that I want to make that. Now here on Skill Tree, I usually don't make exact copies of things. I like to kind of add a little bit of our own flair to it. So to that effect, I had Maddie draw me up a little simplified version here for us to try to play with. The look is basically the same, except for these little fins here at the top form more of a crown than just kind of two flowy fins off to the side. You do what you want, we just like to play with things. Okay, so first things first, since the entire thing is kind of built around these gems here, we needed to make those first. Now, unfortunately, though I do have a dragon's hoard here of treasure, I didn't happen to have a purple gem of the correct size that I needed. So instead, I just decided to build mine out of resin. To do so, I started by busting out some of this modeling clay, which I just jammed into this little container to make sure it keeps its shape while I worked with it. Once it was all packed in there, I made it as smooth as possible so I had a good surface to start working with. Now for the kind of teardrop convex shape of my gem, I actually decided to use this pipe that I had lying around. The bottom area just happens to have that nice shape I was looking for. It makes a perfect indent into my clay. On further reflection though, I realized you could just use a spoon. The back of it's the perfect kind of size and shape anyways. In fact, if you don't have any clay, if you put like a release agent of some sort on here, I bet you can make the resin right into your spoon. Now for the smaller gem at the top here, I just used a chopstick with a rounded end and pressed it into the clay. And with that, my molds are ready and it's time for me to start prepping the resin that I'm gonna use for these jewels. For this, I just happen to have some leftover 2-part crystal resin. I just picked this stuff up at Michael's a while back and it lasts a long time, it comes out really clear and it's just super easy to work with. Now to get this nice deep purple color, I just busted out some of this So Strong purple dye that is specifically made for resin. This stuff is so strong that all I had to use was a little bit that was put on a needle. As you can see, just that little drop gives me a really nice deep purple color. And with that all set, I just added the resin to my mold using a little eyedropper. You don't really need to use a dropper to do this, I just find it's easier to place the resin exactly where I want it by using one. With that all set, I just left it alone to cure for 20 hours. And I know, if you want like instant satisfaction, 20 hours feels like a long time, but with resin, if you don't have something to like remove bubbles from it or whatever, the alternative is just a longer cure time so that everything has a bit more time to kind of clear up. And once it's dried, this really shows. After I've excavated it from its clay prison and shined it all up, you can see it's a really pretty piece. Both these gems came out nice and clear and deep purple, beautiful. I really like how those came out. Okay, so with our gems good, we can actually start building the body of this piece. For this, I'm using Super Sculpting 2 clay. I love this stuff. It's really, really malleable, super easy to use, and then you stick it in the oven and it hardens to be like rock hard. It is fantastic stuff. Link to my bear skull project here if you want to go in more depth on using that kind of clay. Anyways, I started by making my backing and these little flare pieces here by adding thin, pointed little pieces to a roughly triangular flattened panel. After adding the gems to check that I liked the sizing, I added another thin piece around that top crystal just to form a diamond. Then I went in with a razor and cut away any of the excess clay, leaving me with this nice little jagged crown and a snug fit all around the jewel. Then with that to size, I just went back in and started smoothing everything out and sharpening some detail a little bit. So now I need to layer on this kind of snake detail over the top. To do that, I just got rolling and formed out some nice noodles o' clay. This I positioned around the gem just like my picture, making sure that the very end of one side had a ball where the head would be. Then I just put together this little swirl here to make sure it's symmetrical. Finally, I went back in and cut in some scale details with the sharp end of my clay tool. And with that, I'm pretty close to that image that Maddie made me. Honestly, when you're working with clay or whatever, having an image to go off of really is a big help. With that though, this thing was ready to go into the oven to harden. But there was one issue. Because the gems are made of a resin, I don't know if they'd be able to take the 275 degrees that it takes to harden this. I really didn't want to open my oven and just have a puddle of resin just there greeting me. I don't think my wife would like that at all. To solve this issue though, I just made a replacement for the gem out of some tin foil. This way everything will keep its shape while it hardens in the oven. Then, as I said, I just put this in the oven at 275 degrees for about a half hour. That being said, I probably could have done it for about half that time because they came out looking a little crispy. I read that the discoloration can happen and it's fine, but looks a little rough. From here, just like wood, I'm able to use sandpaper to get down any of the rough edges and just hone in any of the little details that I really want to get looking right. All right, so now to add color to this bad boy, I started by adding some black acrylic as a base coat. Using black as a base coat like that really makes the piece look like it has depth after I've added the top coat on. And for a top coat, I'm using my favorite product, Rub and Buff. This stuff is basically a hyper-pigmented wax, and it does a great job making something look metallic. I just take a little bit onto my finger and slowly buff it into the clay. As you can see, by lightly buffing it like this, I let some of the black show through, especially in the deeper parts, which makes this whole piece look more realistic and aged. Alright, so with the color all in place, all I really had to do was stack everything back the way it goes with some adhesive so it stayed into place. For my adhesive, I'm using this 2-part Gorilla Glue epoxy. This I just buttered onto the back of the pieces and applied them where they go. I had a bit of a camera problem here where my camera just kind of panned down slowly, so I missed you seeing me put the gem actually into place, and you can kind of see in this wonky shot me putting the snake into place. But I don't need to hold your hand through this. It's gluing things into place. I just stack them back on top of each other where they went with some epoxy. You get the picture. But there you have it! One pretty piece of bling straight from Heidelin. I dig how this thing came out. That looks dope. Like, I know she wears it here or whatever, but I can see this being on, like, maybe to decorate one of my bags or something. I think that's slick. I'm gonna use that in a future project. I hope you liked this project. If you did, why don't you give me some of that like it love, and do not forget to subscribe so you know when I release new content. In the meantime, though, keep leveling up, you.